The last question I have for you would be the title of the stream, which is, what's the biggest issue? What's the biggest concern heading into the bye week? I'm gonna list you off a couple options, and you don't have
Okay.
to choose these options, but it's just to refresh your memory. One could be Brock Purdy, a lack
What's
of
the
speed.
question again?
The biggest issue going into the bye week for the team,
Okay.
biggest problem. Um, Brock Purdy, a lack of speed on offense, aka and a dynamic receiver that can run fast. Offensive line, defensive line, the secondary. You could say the passing game as a whole, the run game, offensive run game, the defensive run game, the defensive pass game. What are you thinking?
I think the run D. I would say the 49ers run D is the number one issue. They're not stopping the run. And they didn't stop the run in the preseason. That's the part that really is bothersome. They didn't stop the run in the preseason. I asked Shanahan about it at the end of the year, end of the preseason. He's like, well, we were number one last year against the run. I'm like, okay. But I mean, it wasn't the same team. And I would say that the inability to stop the run is, you could call it tackling if you want. The Niners missed 24 tackles in the first 5 games. Over the past 3 weeks, they've missed 32. They missed 13 on Sunday against the Bengals. In the first 5 games, the Niners were giving up 49.4 yards after contact, second best in the league. Those numbers have jumped to 100.7 yards after contact in the last 3 games. As a run defense last year, they were best in the league. They gave up 122.7 yards per game and 4.5 per carry, ranking 24th and 27th respectfully out of the past 2 weeks. So the run D that was number one last year, this year is giving up 122 per game and 4.5 per carry. That's 24th in the NFL and 27th in those 2 categories over the past 3 weeks. That's it right there. That's it. If you go up against some of these teams, Minnesota's pretty good, but if they can run the ball, they're very good. You looked at Cincinnati. We know Burrow's a good quarterback, and we know they've got good weapons. But if they can run the ball, and they did, they're deadly. They ran the ball, and they were deadly. So to me, it's like you got to make teams one-sided. You got to take away other teams' running games. If you can't take away other teams' running games, they become almost impossible to defend. And that's where they're at. They can't stop the run. They're missing tackles. Greenlaw's beat up. They're putting way, way too much emphasis on Greenlaw and Warner being the guys who have to stop the run. Last year, they had a handful of guys who could stop the run. Ebukam was great at stopping the run. Mosley was really a good run defender. Jimmy Ward. Now all these guys are just, when was the last time you saw Tayshaun Gibson step into the hole and crack somebody? I don't know if I've seen it once this year.
He's done it. He's done it a few times, but I agree. I haven't seen much of him. He did get his hands on the ball a couple times. He has a knack for. His thing is he has a knack for catching the ball. He has a knack for being at the right place at the right time and getting interceptions.
Right. But that's not run. That's not stopping the run.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see somebody stand in front of somebody. I just feel like guys are running through the 49er defense. And if Greenlaw doesn't hit them hard or Warner doesn't hit them hard, they don't get hit. Yeah. The DNs aren't playing the run. The corners aren't playing the run. The safeties aren't playing the run. They're just not playing the run. So I would say the run D. What are you going with?
I was going to go with the secondary, but the more I think about it, the more I realize, like, you got, like, John Lynch said today, like, those guys are coming back. You have Darrell Luter Jr. coming back. You have Samuel Womack coming back. I think that will potentially change things around, and especially with Steve Wilkes, like, getting kind of put on the hot seat, maybe he'll change things up in the secondary. But what I'm going to go with, I'm actually going to share the screen here because it would just be easier for me to show it than to explain it. But
okay,
I want to go with the offensive line. When Ezra Cleveland got signed or traded to the Jaguars, right, I was just looking at the PFF grades, and I know PFF isn't the end-all be-all, but Burford and Banks are ranked very low in pass blocking and run blocking. Banks is out, so now who's stepping up for Banks? Is it Feliciano? Is it Brendel? Or Brendel moving over? I don't know. But also Jalen Moore starting
Well,
at
no, I
left
think
tackle.
Feliciano's going to start for Banks because Banks has the turf toe.
But still, so you have Jalen Moore starting for Trent. I mean, this whole offense is based on the run game, and if they can't run the ball, they're toast. And I feel like that's been kind of in stopping them recently. Christian McCaffrey has not been as explosive recently, and I think that has a lot to do with the offensive line just not performing.
They don't open any holes.
Level. Yeah.
I mean, they could think about this game against Cincinnati. They couldn't run to the edges because Cincinnati had 3 DBs that were all sub 4.3 speed. So they couldn't run to the edges. So you're an outside zone rushing team. You can't run to the edges. And you can't run in between the tackles because you're getting no push. Brendel's getting shoved back into the lap of the quarterback. Burford's getting penalties every time they get a decent run. They haven't been able to run the ball between the tackles all year. So, I mean, this is, I'm the guy that I really want to ask questions to is Chris Forster. Why? Because one, Forster's one of the only guys that really talks and doesn't dodge. And two, because we got to have we got to have a real conversation here. Your offensive line is not opening holes for these running backs. Are the running backs not good enough, or is your offensive line not good enough? Because what's going on? We can't say everybody's great and then you can't run at all. And they haven't been able to run most of the year. So I would say that O-line's got some explaining to do. And if it was me, I would take Brendel, who's about 275, 280 off the field, replace him with Feliciano, who's about 3.25. And that would be my first change. I would put Feliciano at center and see if that helps open some run lanes. That's one. Number two, I'm using JP Mason a lot more. JP Mason's a bull. He's a monster. I mean, this guy had a 26-yard touchdown run where he's 235 pounds and he looked fast. And that was in the Dallas game. He hasn't touched the ball since. I mean, seriously, who could see that run and then said, you know what? That looks like the kind of running back we should not use for the next month. No, come on. Once you saw that run, you should have said, hey, look at this guy. Whoa. Yeah, I know CMC's nice, but nobody's this guy. This guy's 230 and can run between the tackles, and he's kind of explosive. I want to see McCaffrey used more flexed out to save him. I want to see Mason put on the field. I'd like to see them get Danny Gray or Ronnie Bell or somebody else, somebody a little bit more dynamic on the outside. Maybe that's CMC. I want to see a little bit more speed. Shanahan said, my team looks slow. My team looks tired. Okay. The bye week's going to is going to help the tired. What's going to make you faster? The only way you're going to get faster is if you put faster people on the field. Yeah. So that's what I want to see. Yeah. I want to see faster people on the field. I want to see Womack. I want to see Luter. I'd rather see Jair Brown. Obviously we're going to see Chase Young. I want to see faster guys, and I want to see faster guys on offense too.
I just think a great indication that the offensive line isn't performing is just by looking at Christian McCaffrey's running stats, because Christian McCaffrey's an elite running back, and you can see the drop off when they start handing the ball off to Elijah Mitchell. He's not getting the same amount of yards per carry. So it's like, if Christian McCaffrey can't get a good yards per carry average, it's not because Christian McCaffrey isn't as good that day. It's because he's not getting the blocks. He's not getting the right spacing. It's not working, and that has a lot to do with the offensive line. Look at his
not opening holes.
Yeah, look at his last 4 games, average rushing yards per attempt. 2.7, 3.9, 3.0, 4.5. 4.5 is not bad, but 2.7 and 3.0, that's terrible for him. He's an elite running back. Elite. And I think people are forgetting that these numbers are really bad because he's scoring touchdowns receiving. So it's like he's still having good games. He's having good fantasy games. He's having good games, period. I'm not saying Christian McCaffrey's a bad player at all. I'm just saying his average yard per carry is not very high in the last few games. And I think that has a lot to do with offensive line. And the offensive line is not getting the same push that they've been getting in
They're not running it well. They're not stopping the run.
It's the core of the offense. They have to be able to run the zone run game. It's what they do.
And you want to help Brock Purdy, get him a run game.
Yeah.
He's a play action pass quarterback. You can't just drop Brock back and have all these guys. You can't run it all. Okay, it's 3rd and 10. Brock, make it happen. He's not. Come on, man. He ain't that guy. And if you watched him in the first half against the Bengals, man, he scrambled. He did what he could. I mean, the guy did what he could.
Yeah.
And then, here you got a quarterback 6 days after a concussion, and you're putting it all on his shoulders. You got no run game, and you can't stop Burrow and the Bengals at all, and you're expecting him to keep pace with those guys. It was putting a lot on his plate, and he had 422 yards. I'm not making excuses for the guy. He's got to own his own turnovers in the fourth quarter. But seriously, the game plan was not Brock Purdy. He's gonna do it all. He's gonna lead them in rushing. He's gonna, doesn't matter. You get to 3rd and 10. Brock Purdy will pull it out. I mean, you could.
He didn't make any mistakes.
Too much.
He didn't even make any mistakes until the fourth quarter. In the third quarter, I still felt like that game was slipping away from them. That they were getting outmatched. So it couldn't only be Brock Purdy. In the fourth quarter, Brock Purdy sold the game. But in the third quarter, when they were still trailing, and Purdy was doing everything perfectly, it was still like, what's going on here? We're getting outplayed. So you can't really put it all on Brock.
Brock Purdy can do some things and keep you in some games and make some plays, but he can't carry the whole team. I mean, he's not going to be able to carry the whole team. This week, they literally asked him to carry the whole team 6 days after a concussion. And the other thing is, this game was set. I mean, the other thing I would say to everybody before we get to the calls, everybody needs to fucking relax. Okay, just relax. Period. Why? Because the Browns game was a major rest advantage for the Browns. Cousins got really hot on 3rd down, and they played a Vikings team that's pretty good in their place. And then this Bengals team had 13 days to prepare. The Niners were on the short week. If you looked at this objectively early in the year, we did. When we looked at that Warren Sharp article about rest, I did a whole video on this. You can look it up from earlier this offseason. This promised to be a very difficult 3-game stretch, and it was. Okay, so now they're going to have a rest advantage against the Eagles. They're going to have a rest advantage a couple times going down the stretch. Let's see what that looks like. But the rest, as somebody who used to do quality control and has put together game plans for professional teams and seen how teams prepare, when a team's got a 1 day advantage, it's a major advantage. When you're coming off a short week, flying back from Minneapolis, and the other team's got 13 days to prepare, that's a major advantage. Major. The Browns had a major advantage. The Bengals had a major advantage. The Niners probably should have beaten the Browns. They had a chance to beat the Vikings, and unfortunately they went 0 for 3. But this whole they'll never win again, the sky's falling. I think they're going to look a lot better coming out of the bye. I really do. I think they're going to find their footing. We'll see.